listening to the Insight NBL Show with your hosts, Matrix and Hammer.
I am not giving you an intro until you hear this.
Oh, Captain, my Captain. Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Mate.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mate, we are talking about captains. We've turned it into our own little segment. We are trying a few new things here at Insight rather than the live ones due to the fact that there is only one day between lockout, giving it to you a few days earlier. Mate, we're here to talk captains, and we would be remiss not to start in Adelaide.
Probably before we go there, it's probably important to let everyone know every single team's on a double this week. We're not chasing just a couple of guys on doubles. The field is wide open, but Adelaide, alphabetical, is that why we're starting there?
No, we're starting there because they are the most top-heavy team in the league, which is fantastic for Supercoach. They also have what you like to call a summer shootout game. I've been calling it Summer Slam all this time, but I got corrected on Twitter, so thanks to the Supercoach community.
Lovely. Yeah, summer shootout game. Put as many points on the board as you can. There is no mercy rule where you can't press like under 12s and have to come back to half court. These scores are going to be huge, much bigger than the C-grade Tuesday night that you're used to, Matrix. But this one, they're taking on Tassie in the summer shootout. Tassie gave up 105 last game to Southeast Melbourne, and there are two very viable captain options for the 36ers.
Mate, it's Kendric Davis. He has been the most in-form player ever. He's definitely had the best individual import season I've basically ever seen. But he's a microwave. I mean, he just locks in for 50 every game, and we're not even surprised by it anymore. For example, last week he rose in cash, and he had a break-even of 51.
Yeah, look, I can't help but feel like a proud father every time he goes off for a massive Supercoach game after calling it so early in the preseason. I'm going to toot my own horn. Call me Amex. I'm going to take credit only. This is my guy. It's going to be hard to bet against him. His matchups are great. His form's phenomenal. What's there to say?
If anything, and I know there's a summer shootout game, Tasmania have been always good defensively. They've been the number one defensive team in the comp. And Illawarra have been the number one team in the comp. And I think they've been sitting at the third defensive team in the comp. It doesn't seem to worry KD because the guy's just an elite talent. But that's the only draw card that probably makes this whole segment a little bit more interesting because KD's been set and forget every week. We've had some of our other pods. They've been uploaded by now about super pods and everything like that. If everybody's trying to outthink the room and you just go KD, you could actually get a huge bump.
Yeah. And we've got to remember, this game's at My State Bank Arena where the Jack Jumps have been great. Adelaide haven't been as good on the road. Hasn't affected KD as much as other players. But look, it is the round, I reckon, to have a pod captain. But I don't know if I can bring myself to do it. I think KD he's my number one.
Let me write you another little scenario.
Go on.
Montrezl Harrell against whatever Tasmania throw at the 4 spot. Ian Hummer, anyone? Has he even turned up in Tasmania yet? Majok Dang, I'm still not sure if he's turned up in Tasmania yet.
My boy Fab.
Yeah, I mean, like, the matchup is probably there for Trez better than KD.
Yeah.
And if the coach in Adelaide decides to actually coach, and I'm not sure whether he's done that all year, to be honest, from everything I've seen, this is a much better matchup for Trez than it is for KD. KD does a lot of assists. And in the last one, I think we saw both KD and Trez both score 28 points.
Yeah.
Mate, KD could just be dishing it to Trez all game, which is conducive to both of them. But Trez could have an absolutely monster game.
Yeah, we know Magnay's still out until probably early February, so there is no rim protection. The rebounds are going to be there. The blocks are going to be there. Look, I really like this matchup for Trez, but hey, he has been a little less consistent than KD, hasn't he? He tends to go missing, but he's on the back of 2 pretty good games. Does this blow out? I know it's a summer shootout. They're going to be trying to rack up the score, but they've got some options at big.
And when they play Illawarra, if I had to talk about any weak link defensively at Illawarra, it would be that Trez, I don't think Mason Peatling will be able to stay in front of him. Darius Days is going to have nightmares for a week after playing against Montrezl Harrell. I think Illawarra are the most well-rounded team in the comp. But if I had to pick any crack, it's the fact that they're starting Mason Peatling and Darius Days as their bench impact player hasn't turned up in weeks.
And I don't think either of those guys are strong enough from the 3-point line to draw Trez far enough away from the hoop to make him uncomfortable. I think he's a really good pod. And I would not be upset captaining him over KD. I think that a little riskier, but the return could be enormous.
Mate, look, we're talking captains and we're talking basically great teams at the moment. Sydney have been good, not quite great. X has been fantastic, though, and he's got Cairns in his next 2 games this week. When I'm looking at captains, and especially pod captains, I like to go read down the list and see who's playing Cairns. Sam Wardenberg hasn't played. I expect him to probably turn up and play next week, but he is not the talent that Cooks is.
No, and defensively, he's a bit of a rusty gate. He'll let anyone through swinging in the wind. My only concern here is that Cairns, and look, give it to them, they beat Illawarra last week, but they've been putrid. There's been massive losses. We know how deep Sydney is. Do we see a world where the game's over at halftime and they put the cue in the rack and we have a captain who plays 15 minutes?
That is a concern. And looking at Cooks, his first one is against Melbourne. And if I had to pick, my favourite defensive player to watch there at the moment is probably Jack White. Yeah. He's good, and I think he matches up quite well against X. So, it's something to be taken into consideration if you think that Cairns are still shit, even though they had the win last week, and you think that they'll put the cue in the rack early.
Yeah, not as high on X. A lot of guys may still have him. I think there's safer options and options with much bigger upside.
Mate, Jalen Adams on the same team. Melbourne haven't been the same team defensively. And I've been okay with Jack White there. It's the guards where I've seen haven't really fired. We do have that question mark of the next import guard coming in as well with Adams. So a few question marks. But again, I like the matchup against Cairns.
Yeah. Look, that's the biggest question mark for me. I think Jalen Adams is in terrific form. I think he's had in the back of the mind they're getting an import, and he's like, you're not taking the ball out of my hands. But this guy, I've seen his stats. I'm expecting him to come in a little bit rusty. He hasn't played a lot of late. But from his stats, it seems like he gets some assists. He gets to the hoop and scores the ball. But, you get 6 assists a game in Europe. You got to have that ball in your hand a bit. Are we bringing a ball handler who's going to take away?
It depends if you think Jalen Adams getting the ball off ball will be able to score an extra 7 points per game to make up for the 3 assists that he's going to lose. I think that's also a real possibility.
Yeah, when you want an extra 7 points, he scored 41 last week. What do you want from him?
Yeah, I'm just saying to cover the fact that he's going to be losing 3 assists. So he loses 3 assists but gains 7 points. So, he gets an extra 1 Supercoach point. He's in the same spot. And
look, this week I don't hate it because I'd imagine they're going to bring this guy in and they just want him to get the 7 games or 9 games or whatever it is under his belt so he qualifies for playoffs. It might be a real gradual transition, but I would have liked to have got a look at it last week.
Me too. Of course, the same situation with the Cairns matchup as well. Mate, Ryan from Astute Newstead, he might be captaining Jalen Adams. He usually slides into my DMs about this time in the week to ask me who I'm captaining. But He's an expert at NBL, but he's also an expert at getting you the best interest rate. So if your current home loan interest rates are above 6.2%, get in contact with him about refinancing your current home loan. He can also give you a capacity calculator to let you know where you need to be to get your dream home or to get your next home or get your investment property. Get in contact with him, have a little bit of a chat, let him know that Insight sent you. And I think he's in the top 500 at the moment if you want to ask him for some Supercoach advice while you're on the blower.
For sure. It's on my list of things to do to give him a call. So see what he can do. I'll come back with a testimonial. Hey, your next guy on your list, this is a big one. None other than Bryce Cotton. I am intrigued by this one. What are your thoughts?
Look, he didn't score his worst Supercoach game in probably the last 10 games that he's played was against Brisbane. And that was where James Bateman blew up and they blew up. I suppose they sat Cotton down. But they do have a shootout game as well, the summer shootout games. So Cotton's going to have the ball in his hands in that Tasmania matchup as well. I don't know, man. Like, I just can't bet against Bryce Cotton at the moment. And we raised question marks with Cooks and Adams. We could get around KD, but I think if you found yourself a few hundred points out, captaining Cotton could be absolutely huge. He's only 3.5% even owned at the moment. A captain option is top shelf.
Keep it in mind, though, that we're dropping this early and they're on a single this week. So I'm expecting that 3.5% to go up considerably. But look, I don't hate it. He scores well. You know he's going to play 38 minutes a game. And even if he's not hitting the shots, and you know Tassie's going to throw a double at him, he's shown he can get his assists.
You can't bet against Cotton. Has to be brought up on a double. Basically, yeah, a given.
For me, though, I want to own Cotton. I don't think I'll captain him.
Cool. I think if I own Cotton, I would pod captain him.
Okay.
Mate, one guy that I'm actually extremely high on for captain is I think he's been talked about in Brisbane as Ariana Prather's husband.
Handbag?
Yeah. Look, Casey Prather's been in career best form. We just watched him drop another 50 piece. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, he does have another game. But he's got Cairns, which Brisbane aren't as good as Melbourne, I don't think. So you were talking about Sydney putting the Q in the rack. I don't think Brisbane will get up enough against Cairns for them to put the Q in the rack. So look, Prather against Higgins Tisha or Pedro Bradshaw or
Wardenberg.
Yeah, exactly. Wardenberg. He'll rip him to absolute shreds. Yeah. I think it could be huge for Prather.
I don't think we've got anyone who can go with Prather. He's too strong inside. He's too mobile outside. He's hitting the three in career best form. He's like a fine wine. He has gotten better than his MVP seasons down with United and Perth. I really like this. I gave it a lot of consideration this week to captain him. We've seen the roles there. Justin Schuler's in love with him, and so he should be. And look, we've given Schuler a lot of shit this year. I don't think he's the greatest coach, but he was the oracle on this one. He saw Prather, and obviously had a relationship back in the United days, but he saw something when he was injured end of last year, and he's reaping the dividends now, and he's a genuine captain option.
I just had a 3-minute rant about the worst or the crack in Illawarra's lineup is Mason Peatling and Darius Days, and Prather's been playing forward. So he's been playing that 4 spot, and he would be playing against that. Neither of those guys can, like you said, nobody can keep up with him, but those big bodies and playing him at the 4, like Prather has an excellent matchup in both of those games. And every single player we've mentioned before Casey Prather, we brought up question marks. I don't actually have any question marks for Prather.
Yeah. And you're right. Illawarra love to play inside, and they show some big lineups at times. We've seen Olbrich next to Sam Froling. Neither of them are comfortable enough to keep with Prather out there with that ball on a string, hitting that triple, blowing past them. This matchup's got me excited all of a sudden.
Mate, the next guy I actually ripped my team apart to get this week. Trey Kell.
Okay.
He's playing New Zealand and Adelaide. So Adelaide defensively,
weak.
They just play at a high pace and they've been outscoring teams. They haven't been stopping anyone.
Yep.
So even though they've played into some form, it's not from defense. And New Zealand have just not played good at all. Of course, there's the question mark of putting the Q in the rack and everything like that with New Zealand. But how do you feel about Trey Kell this week? Probably the best matchups, or at least playing the two worst defensively teams out of anybody I've mentioned.
Yeah, look, I don't hate it when you think about it in isolation. But when you compare him to all the other options, are you putting him ahead of KD? Are you putting him ahead of Cotton? Are you putting him ahead of Prather? I don't think he's a top 3 option. I don't think, you'll be that upset if you have to go there. I think he'll be fine. The matchups are good. And look, he's been thereabouts this year, but I don't think he has the same ceiling at the moment. And in saying that, he's had triple-double games before, but not for a while. He's probably my 4th or 5th option.
No, sounds good. And if Harvey is cooking, then Trey Kell seems to take a real dip there. Yeah. And that's the question mark. I can't really see that happening now that Bateman's out of the team for Prather. I can't really see, an absolute ripping game from Pinder so Cotton doesn't get the ball, or Henschel, or, Adams. I'm not going to see the ball getting taken out of all these guys' hands except for Kell. So that's, I suppose, the question mark for me.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Mate, that's captains this week. Good luck for you all through round 16. You've listened to an Insight Fantasy Sports podcast.